Well, YouTube, this is my fourth video on analyzing graphs of functions in which we're going to focus on what we refer to as relative maxima and minima, or a maximum and a minimum would be the singular of those terms there. But when we look at a graph here, you'll notice that I have this cubic function over here that is given by f of x equals x times quantity x minus 2 times quantity x plus 3. But you'll notice that it goes up and then down and up, or we could say that it's increasing, goes from increasing to decreasing to increasing again. But if I were to say, where do you see some maximum and minimum points? Naturally, my eyes kind of tend to point out these sections of the graph right here, okay? So when we refer to maxima and minima, we are referring to spots on the graph where we would have something that's going from, say, increasing to decreasing. That would give us a local maximum or a relative maximum, whereas if we were to go from decreasing back to increasing, we would say that this low spot here, this would be referred to as a relative minimum. So this is a min, and this is a max. We're going to talk about how we determine these using a graphing utility, as well as how we kind of report on them. But again, the definition of a relative maximum or minimum, we say, is any point on the graph where a function changes from increasing to decreasing, or vice versa, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to kind of try to discern what these points are. If I were to say, well, what are these points? And what is it that we actually consider to be the max or consider to be the min? This point here looks to me like, you know, if I went back 2 and then up, we can count here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This looks like the point 2, 8. And then we would say that this point down here looks like it's over 1, and I would guess like maybe down 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to say that this is 1, -4. When we refer to local maximum or relative maximum or minimum values, we can say that we are actually reporting on output values or range values here. So you'll notice that when I write the maximum value here, I might say that we have a relative max. It is not the absolute maximum of this graph. It's just a maximum on, say, this little interval right here from, say, this x value to this x value here. But we say that we have a relative max of 8. And the reason why I say of 8 is because this is an f of x value. When we talk about a value for a function, we're talking about its y values. So this function has a relative maximum value of 8, and it occurs at x equals -2, and this is a -2 here, okay? Whereas if I were to say, well, what's our relative minimum value here? Do we have any relative minimum values? I say, well, my function has a relative minimum value of -4, and it occurs at x equals 1, okay? So this is one way to report on these, or we could say that, you know, we have a relative maximum at -2, 8. We could report it that way, or we could say at, you know, I'll put this little at sign here, 1, -4. So, you know, visually we can just kind of verify these if the graphs are straightforward. Sometimes, though, you're going to have functions that don't have nice, pretty values like these here, integer values. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our calculators out here, and we're going to look at how I would find this using a calculator's calc functions for maxes and mins. So the first thing we want to do is go to our y equals here, and what we're going to do is we're going to input the function. And so I need to go x, and we say times x minus 2, and then we're going to take that times the quantity x plus 3. And just to verify that I have this graph in here correctly, I'm going to go ahead and click on graph, and you'll notice that we get, you know, the same graph that we're looking at here. But in terms of finding the maxes and mins, again, we're going to go to this calc menu behind our trace key here, okay? If I hit trace exactly and I hit, say, left, 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 or right, 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 you'll notice that that trace key kind of crawls along the curve, and you'll notice that I get really close to -2, 8, but I can't quite get exactly on there. So going to calc, if I hit second trace, we get this menu right here, and instead of going to zeros like we did last time, we're going to go to min and max. I'm going to start with maximum since I'm looking for a relative maximum at that point. So very much like looking for zeros, it's going to say, give me some x value to the left of that maximum. So I know that negative, you know, this is almost -3-ish here. I'm going to hit enter, and it says, well, dear calculator, you know, the maximum is somewhere to the right of this x value. And then we're going to go back to the right side of that maximum value, somewhere over here. Maybe right here is fine. And then it's going to say, guess where you think this maximum is. Get close for me. So we can get really close at about this point right here. And if I hit enter, we'll notice here that it says, well, you have a relative maximum at -1.786301, 8.2088207. So when I was doing this visually just a moment ago, you'll notice that I was kind of guessing at these things right here. But we notice now that we were actually incorrect. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that we have a relative maximum at approximately, or a maximum value of approximately 8.2-ish if we go out one decimal value here. So we're going to say of approximately 8.2 at, and this was at an x value, let's go ahead and pull this up here again, at about negative 1.786. So I'm going to go negative 1.7 at x equals negative 1. We'll go 1.8. So this would be our relative maximum value, and likewise we're going to look for our minimum value just by going to our calc menu here. We can go back and highlight our minimum. I was going to say, well, where do you think a minimum is? We're going to go somewhere to the left of that minimum on the right side right here. I'm going to say enter. We'll go somewhere to the right of the minimum. We'll choose a right bound. This is sufficient right here. And then we're going to try to guess at where it's at. You know, we thought it was 1 comma negative 4. I did. But when I hit enter here, we'll notice that it's at 1.1-ish, comma negative 4.1-ish, okay? So that negative 4.1-ish, or negative 4.06, we'd say that is our minimum value of negative, approximately negative 4.1, and it occurs at x is approximately, and we'll look at this again here, about 1.1, okay? So 1.1. And again, what I want everybody to know is, of course, we could report this by saying, well, we have a relative max at approximately negative 1.8, comma 8.2, and we have a relative min at negative positive 1.1, comma negative 4.1. But again, in terms of what is considered to be the max or min value, we are looking at the value of the function, which is the y value. Cheers.